Now this little exercise goes back to something we did in the previous section when we were substituting numbers into formulas. When we were looking at tables and graphs, we created a few tables and generated a few graphs. So here's my equation. I just picked a few points. All we're going to do is substitute the x value in to an appropriate point to find out what the y value would be. Now will give us two values which we can use as coordinates or ordered pairs and then plot the graph. Now, most people start left to right. I always like to start right to left actually because I prefer to do the easier numbers first with no negatives. And often we can find a pattern as well. So let's do that. So plug 2 into here. 2 times 2 is 4. Take away 3, 1. Plug in 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Take away 3, negative 1. Of course, you can use your calculator if you're not so confident with some of these numbers. 0, 2 times 0, take away 3 is negative 3. And I can actually already see what the pattern is here. Can you see these numbers are decreasing by 2? So my next number would be negative 5, negative 7. Actually, more importantly, if you read it left to right, which is normally how you would read, these numbers go up by 2. And the reason it goes up by 2 is because it says 2x. Now that works when I have a scale increment of 1. It's going to go up by the number that it says for x. Now it says pick 2 points from the table and find the slope. So I could just find these 2 points. 1, negative 1, 2, 1. So y2 minus y1, 1, take away negative 1, divided by 2, take away 1. So 1 take away negative 1 is 2, 2 take away 1 is 1, and you end up with a slope of 2. And you can pick any 2 points if you want to check one more just to make sure, but you do end up with a slope of 2. What value does the line cross the y-axis? Now if you go ahead and plot these, it's actually when the x value is 0. So where it crosses the y-axis is actually negative 3. Now, the reason I gave this exercise is to spot something that's very important. The slope actually refers to this number here, and the last number is actually the last number of the equation. So there's a very clear link between the equation that you're given and the slope of that line, and also where it crosses the y-axis. Now, you might want to check a few other ones for these, but if you were to do this one has a slope of 3, and a y-intercept is the correct word for where it crosses the axis at negative 1. This one has a slope of negative 2, and this one goes through the y-axis at 1. This one has a slope of 1/2, because this is the same as 1x over 2. And there's no number on the end at all here, and that's because the intercept is actually 0. Now at this point, I think it's probably good to learn some vocabulary. So I mentioned this phrase linear equations earlier. Linear, within the word linear, you can see the word line. So all these graphs are going to be straight lines. Now there's different ways that we can write the answer. Probably the most common way is this: y equals something x and then a number at the end, which we call slope-intercept form. And that's because this number here is your slope, as you just saw, and this number here is your y-intercept. So this is slope, and this is y-intercept. And that's very useful if you want to find the slope, because all you have to do is look at the number of x's, and that will tell you exactly what it's going to be. Standard form is something x plus something y equals a number. So like 3x plus 5y equals 10. However, a, b, and c must all be integers, or if you prefer, whole numbers. So I can't have like a 1/2 x. Also, the x should really be positive as well, but sometimes we tend to overlook that rule a little bit. Now there is something called the point slope formula, and we're going to come back to that one a little bit later. But you can see there's a formula for that. That's supposed to say y minus y1 there. There we go, make more correction now. And the y equals 1 is one we saw earlier. So we know the y-axis goes like this. So the y equals 1 was the opposite one, if you remember. So something like y equals 2. And actually that's going to be your horizontal line. So any horizontal lines where you have to find the equation, they're all going to start with y equals, and it's just going to be the number that it passes through on the y-axis. And then x equals then, that's going to be the opposite to this. So that's your vertical line. And remember, the x-axis goes across, but actually x equals a number does the opposite, so that's actually going to be a vertical line. So that'll be something like x equals 3. The reason we're coming up with these formulas, number 1, 4, and 5, is we're going to use that for the next section, because now we have to start finding equations of lines and given graphs. So if I'm given a picture like this and I'm asked to find out what the slope is, or I'm asked to find out what the equation is, then I've got a couple of things to work out. And we know it's going to look like y equals mx plus b. So the easiest one to find, first of all, is where does it cross this y-axis? Well, it crosses at 1. Now, as it's a positive one, I'm just going to put a +1 on the end. Now, the other thing I need to find is the slope. So I need to find 2 points that lie on the line and go through corners of squares. So I can see here, I can also see here. There's plenty of other points I could have chosen. In fact, I could have chosen any of these points here. I'm going to go with these two here. So I have to go up 2 squares, and then I have to go across 1 square. So my slope is 2 divided by 1, which is just 2. Therefore, my answer is y equals 2x. So whatever the slope is, we're just going to put that in front of the x, put the y-intercept at the end, and that should be the equation. Now, if I set this up correctly, we should be able to check what our answer actually is. And it looks like all my own stuff's come undone. But it is 2x plus 1. Okay, let's try another one. First of all, look where it crosses the y-axis, -2. And sometimes for the SOL, that can be enough for half of your answers as well, just knowing what the y-intercept is going to be. Find points that lie on the line. I can see quite a few here. Making sure they go through corners of squares, and I'll go with these two. The closer the points are, the easier this is. So I go up 3, across 1, 3 over 1 is 3, so y equals 3x minus 2. Let's have one more try, see if this one actually works. That's the general form of the equation, or the standard. So it is the correct answer. I need to fix that one. And I want to do a couple more. So I want to do this one. Now this one's a very special one. We can try and find the slope, but this is a horizontal line. So for horizontal lines, we want to use the shortcut. So it was actually number 4 that was on that last sheet that we looked at a second ago. So horizontal lines are all y equals. And we just have to look, where does it pass through? 3. Y equals 3. Alright, this hasn't been very successful so far. Let's have a check. Okay, that will work perfectly well. And last one just for right now. This is a vertical line. So vertical lines are actually x equals, because it's the opposite of the axis. So x equals, goes through 1 on the x-axis. So just x equals 1. So some questions are actually very quick to do. There we go. Oh, except it shouldn't say y equals. So just x equals 1. So that's the introduction, and that's more what we're going to work on in the following lesson.